Hi, I'm Tim Nesmith, Ship Superintendent for the USS KIDD Veterans Museum, and we are here today with our special guest star, Ryan Szimanski from Battleship, New Jersey.
Hi, guys.
We have been talking previously on the New Jersey channel about the retrofitting of KIDD and how we were able to bring her back 40 years to a 1945 target date and appearance. Ryan, what is New Jersey's target date?
So our period of interpretation has always been around 1990 during the ship's last active deployment when she sails to the Persian Gulf during the Iran-Iraq tanker war. And after that, she starts the decommissioning process, and that's pretty much the end of the ship, as an active warship at least. So much like you guys when we talked in our previous video, from day one when we got the ship, the powers that be, the curatorial team, the executive team came up with what the most attainable period of interpretation was for our vessel.
Okay. And that was decom because they had changed so much of her structure, I'm assuming.
Oh my goodness. That was something that was interesting listening to you talking in the video we filmed on our channel previously, because I've talked about some of this content on the Battleship's channel in the past. And like most of the things I say on the channel that apply to the Battleship, I'm like, this is the way to do it. But it's not. Other ships have other ways to do things. So you talking about how they removed things, but they didn't make major changes because she was a training ship, really spoke to me because that allowed you to be able to put those things back. Whereas us, they cut things off, they add things on, they completely change rooms. And we probably have fewer changes than the other Iowas because they get slightly more expensive reactivations in the 80s than we got. So certain spaces, like we still have our original officer's galley, they've lost that on most of the others, like some changes up on the bridge, that sort of stuff. So in some ways we're more original, but it's still so far from the being able to turn her back to World War II.
Right, and I know some of the Iowas, I don't know if all of them, got the missile launchers later on. So that's going to change structure and everything.
Exactly. All four of us have missile launchers. They built big decks over where a lot of our anti-aircraft guns were and other things they added onto the superstructure. Interestingly, they didn't cut off, like, you know, around the second funnel, there's that triple stack 40 millimeter gun tub.
Yeah. That's
pretty iconic in the World War II shots. I always assume that they just cut that off and dropped in the new prefab box with the missiles in. No, they did all these complex angled welds over top of the original thing and left it there. So in theory, we could cut all of that off with
lift it off.
Way more money.
Yeah.
But for us, our crew doesn't just go to the 1960s.
Right.
We have crew members who served on board into the 1980s and 90s, and we aren't getting a lot of our World War II guys coming back anymore and wanting to see their spaces.
Right.
We are getting our Vietnam era guys starting to retire and come back. And we are starting to get a lot of our 80s and 90s era guys who are finally hitting that age where they're realizing that what they did when they were kids was actually super significant. And they're coming back and showing their families and reliving that. And so they want to see their spaces. And that's one of the things that makes ships like the Iowa-class battleships in particular really hard to retrofit, because those guys are our supporter base. And they're going to be around for decades more, which you guys don't have that to the same extent.
Right.
So they want to see their spaces, and they're coming here now. So we don't want to remove the original historic fabric from the 80s or 90s, because who are we at the museum to say that her service in Lebanon in 83 and 84 is any less significant than her service in Vietnam or the 50s or the 40s. Like, we may think of these ships as World War II warships because that's when they were built, but they see significant service throughout that time.
Through. Yeah.
And so we don't want to remove the original fabric of the ship and replace it with facsimiles. And that was another thing that struck me from you talking in our other video, that how much you were able to find original stuff because of when you were doing this.
Yes. Yes. and I was in grade school at the time, so it was not me.
You plural.
It was the previous Tim that was on here, Tim Rizzuto. The guys that come back for us now, like you said, our World War II crew just can't travel anymore. I only know of 2 surviving as of this date that I know personally. But one thing I've noticed is our Cold War crew, particularly the late 50s and early 60s before she decommed in 64, they come back and they recognize stuff on the ship. But one comment that they always have is it's so much more crowded in her World War II configuration than it was when I was on, because they had stripped the 20 millimeters, they had stripped the K guns off, they stripped the 40 millimeters off after a certain point, the torpedo tubes disappear at a certain point. So a lot of them were like, wow, she looks like my old ship, but she looks cluttered and everything, which, they didn't need all that obsolete equipment when they were on board. Do your Vietnam era guys come back and kind of say the same thing, or does New Jersey kind of have the same sort of locations, like the 40s are gone, but something else is in place there?
No, we definitely are less cluttered, especially topside, even with all the missiles and things that they replaced some of the weapon systems with. But we do get the World War II guys, when they were coming back frequently, would talk about how much more room there was in these spaces than they remembered. Because the berthing spaces, especially, they're removing the old pipe racks that were stacked 4 or 5 tall, and it was the modern style coffin racks. They're still contemporary on so many ships that were just 2 or 3 tall, depending on the height of the space. So individual sailors had way more locker space and way more personal space. And the crew went from 2,700 maxed out in World War II down to 1,600 in the 1980s. So there was a lot more space at that time.
Yeah. And talking about target dates, our sisters, Cass and Young and Sullivan's, are set up for a target date. I believe Sullivan's is 58. I think maybe Cass and Young is 59 or 60, somewhere in there. And they get hit all the time. How come you don't backfit? How come you don't backfit? And you were talking a moment ago about your Gulf War guys, your Vietnam guys. They deserve to have a ship recognizing their service. And the same is true for the destroyer sailors, for Laffey, for the 2 Gearings, for the other 2 Fletchers that are here. The only reason Kidd was able to go back to World War II was because she wasn't structurally changed and because none of the others could do it. So it was an opportunity to represent something for those World War II guys that didn't really exist because of all the modernizations that they did in the fleet.
Yeah, and I really like that idea, and it makes so much sense to have one ship backdated and another not, so you've got those opportunities. And I've heard people suggest with the Iowas are in 4 main wars. There are 4 Iowas, they're all preserved. Why don't you take Iowa back to World War II, and Wisconsin back to Korea, New Jersey to Vietnam, and Missouri to Gulf War, or something along those lines. And that would make sense because we're all in the same time period. I think Missouri and Wisconsin are representing like 1991 as their period of interpretation. We're 1990. I think Iowa's 88 or 89. So like we're all within this very small window. But it just goes back to you guys doing this in the 80s and being able to get that original stuff. And some of that original stuff was available because they were removing it from the Iowas to put them back in service at a time when all the other World War II ships are coming out of service.
Quite literally, because if you go into Kidd's aft head, aft cruise head, you see the troughs with the little seats on them that they used instead of toilets. Those came from Wisconsin when she was in Pascagoula, Mississippi.
In like 86, 87? Yeah. Wow, that timeline does line up perfectly. I know Texas got a lot of her 40 millimeter guns when they were removed from Missouri in 84, 85 when she was being reactivated.
Yeah.
So that's wild.
It really is the moment in time when you get the ship and what was structurally changed, and then ultimately how much money will it cost, and spending all that money, what does it get you in the long term? Do you see a return on it? So as far as World War II battleships, I mean, you do have Texas, you do have Alabama, who was, I think, decommed in 46 or 48.
Yeah, very soon after the war for Texas, Alabama, Massachusetts, North Carolina.
Yeah, so you do have World War II examples, just not on the Iowas.
Yeah, and I do love visiting them because they're slightly different classes, but like the magazine's set up the same way, the wardroom's set up the same way, the interiors that really changed are pretty much the same. The dimensions might be a little bit different, but it's the same furnishings and the same color. I love the wardroom green color.
Seafoam green.
My childhood bedroom's painted this color.
So, any big renovations? Y'all just got out of dry dock. Any big renovations coming up that you guys are excited about?
So after we came back from dry dock, we painted the above water part of the part of the hull, the freeboard. We were not able to do that in the yard. We were able to do it pierside. We finished redecking the entire main deck, which has been like a 5-year project. Mm-hmm. So now we've moved the redecking efforts into the superstructure. And the next major restoration project for the ship is likely going to be painting the upper part of the superstructure, which is going to be multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars because of the scaffolding we would need to do it. A lot of the other work we did in dry dock and pierside, like they put a man lift on the barge, and they were able to paint off of this man lift on the barge rather than have scaffolding.
Well, see, I don't feel so bad putting scaffolding on our paint barge now and worried about OSHA and everybody with cell phones taking pictures. Somebody actually put a man lift on it. That's crazy. And so that's another point, too, for going backwards. It's easier to go backwards on a small ship like KIDD. And KIDD is a small ship compared to an Iowa-class battleship. The retrofitting you would have to do for something that size is just mind-boggling. So the smaller the ship, the easier it is.
So, and it's worth pointing out that while you guys are in the middle of a 40-year process retrofitting the ship back and backdating her, like we talked about in the other video, just because we received the ship in her 1990 configuration, that doesn't mean that she was complete. So we're still 30 years into a project, or I guess we're still over 20 years into a project of backdating her to how she would have looked in service and not with all the stuff that was removed when she was mothballed and taken out of service. So like just in the last couple of months, we were able to get our RPV drone antenna dome put back on the ship. And we were able to get our missing Harpoon missile tubes back on the ship. So,
because all that was classified.
Yeah, it's taken off and used on modern ships because it's still a contemporary system. And now finally we're at the point where that sort of stuff's being taken out and we're able to get it now. So we're still doing the same sort of work you are, right, just to a different date.
Different era.
So I have a question for you guys to answer down in the comments section. Let's say that one or more of the Iowas are not reactivated in the 80s. So let's say Missouri, she's decommissioned in 55, she's not reactivated. She's still close to her World War II configuration, and it's the 1980s when those World War II parts are out there. Do you keep her in her current 1950s configuration? When that's a period when she fights in the Korean War, she had President Truman on board, those sorts of things? Or do you backdate her to World War II? Let us know in the comment section down below. I'm interested to hear what you guys would say to that, because I know my answer.
What is it?
I don't think I would backdate her.
Bigger as she is for Korea.
I think I would keep her at her most modern configuration, because I think it would be still too difficult for a ship of that size to take it back. And it's really impressive getting to come on a ship like KIDD or Slater, right, or COD, or even North Carolina was in a 1948 configuration when they got her, and then they painted the camouflage scheme back on, and they added a lot of the anti-aircraft stuff, and they don't have the catapults yet, but they added the float plane back on to how she would have looked during World War II.
And it sounds sci-fi, but there's a ripple effect because there's a finite amount of that equipment, even in the 80s. So if Missouri was backfit, what would be missing from KIDD? What would be missing from North Carolina, Alabama, and all the other ships?
Texas doesn't have any 40mm guns today because they're still on Missouri. You're right.
Yeah, so there is a ripple effect for that. But, you know, it's nice to dream. It is nice to dream. Ryan, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Thanks for making the trip down from New Jersey.
It's my pleasure, Tim. Thanks for having us.
Remember, the USS KIDD receives no federal or state funding on a regular basis. So remember to go to usskid.com and press that donate button. You can watch these videos on our channel and make money for us that way. The channel is monetized. And Ryan, what's your channel's handle?
Battleship New Jersey.
Battleship New Jersey. Go to their YouTube. They're monetized. Watch their videos. They get thousands of videos. You can spend weeks binging on it. And then if they want to donate, what do they do?
Go over to battleshipnewjersey.org/donate.
And you can support 2 great ships with 2 great missions. Thanks for watching, guys. And remember, part 1 is over on the New Jersey's channel. We'll see you next time.